Guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's me here, Jason's Mapping Solutions, and I'm going to give you a tutorial on the basics of Python programming. This is relevant because in GIS sometimes you find yourself that you're dealing with so much data, or whatever you're doing, it's a repetitive process, and instead of doing that repetitive process, you can just automate what you're doing using programming. And in this case I'm talking about Python, which is a high level programming language, and it's object oriented. That is, we have classes in the objects, so anything in Python can be an object, and a class can have its own methods, and it's open source. That is, you can find its source code online, so it's good. Whenever you want to get to know anything, you can just check the Python documentation, which I'm going to show you. Python is very popular, and if you are aware of the major companies like Google, they mostly use Python. It's also a cross-platform, that is, depending on the operating system that you're using, whether it's Windows, Mac or Linux, you can use Python on it. So when you're writing your code in Python, there is a particular, you can choose any development environment that you want to use, or Python interface. There is the Python IDLE, which is cross-platform. You can use that, or you can use the command line, that is the Python shell, or the Python Win, which is specific for Windows. Apart from that, there are many types of these IDEs. For example, the Visual Studio Code, which it's not specific to a programming language. You can code in any language. So if you're doing a lot of coding in more than one language, instead of just using one that's specific to Python, you can use one that you can code in different languages, for example VS Code or PyCharm. So when you're using a development environment, in comparison to coding in the command line, there's some benefits that you get. For example, the color coding, where the IDE, it colors the different lines of code differently. For example, if it's a variable, it's in a different color. If you're defining a function, as you can see, it's in a different color. The outputs are in a different color, so you're able to differentiate, so you can tell. Also, it can debug for you. If there is an error, it can show you where the error is. And since Python, indenting is very important, so when you're using a good IDE, it will do the indentation by default, which is good, so you don't have to count the spaces on your own. If you're not familiar with this, don't worry, you're going to learn about this. So basically, when you're starting to code, it's good to choose a good IDE, so that even when you're importing modules, it can predict for you which one you are trying to import. So it makes it is easier for the programmer when writing the code. This is how the current Python documentation, the official documentation, looks like. So as you can see, currently we're in the Python 3.10.5 currently. So if you just need to read about Python, this is the best place to go to, because it has everything. This is the original documentation for Python. So whenever you want to learn about Python, they have tutorials here. You can read them, and of course there are many tutorials online. So this is the main documentation for Python. So Python has various uses. For example, in machine learning, Python is used in machine learning, things like analyzing data, creating a model and doing some training. So you can use in things like classification, especially in GIS we mostly do classification. You can use machine learning to classify your data, or maybe images. Python is also used in web development, especially the server side. Same case to software development. You create software softwares using Python. For example, in GIS, softwares like ArcGIS, QGIS, they were developed using Python. So for example, if you want to develop a QGIS plugin, you would use Python, creating systems. And these companies like Facebook, Google, Instagram, if you use them, that's just know that the creation of that was from Python. So that just shows you how Python is powerful. So in GIS, how do we use Python? First, in GIS, the most basic thing is we do some spatial analysis. I've been posting many videos on how to do different processes in the GIS softwares like ArcGIS, something like hydrological modeling. I've created a video on that. So assuming you want to do all those processes but for many sets of data, that would mean if you're doing it using ArcGIS, that would mean you do it repeatedly. But instead of doing that, you can just write a Python code to do that for you. Then you just do it for the whole data. For example, you can look through your data, something like that, which it reduces your time for working on it, and it makes things easier. You can even create new function, do new things, create new things, so it's good. Also, you can create models and do predictions, things like weather. So when you create a model and you analyze the data, you identify a pattern, and that pattern helps you in predicting the future. You can create applications, you can create some softwares, and of course spatial data analysis, which I think every GIS user would really appreciate. That instead of clicking the software as many times, you're doing whatever you're doing, instead of doing that so many times, you can just write a code, and anytime you'll want to do the same thing, you just run your code. That makes it so easy. So this is an example of how we use Python in GIS. We have the GeoPandas, which it's a module which we use for data analytics. We have things like matplotlib for plotting data. So basically, just knowing these things, understanding Python will make it easy for you when you're doing your analysis. It saves you so much time. Like I said, these applications like ArcGIS and QGIS, they are mainly made by Python and other programming languages like C++, of course. But the thing is, Python is used, so it's good. That means as a GIS user, you can just learn Python and use Python to automate your processes. That's the end of this tutorial. So basically, the aim of this video is to give you an idea of what Python is, to understand that if I decide to learn Python, how am I going to use it in my GIS work or in my remote sensing work, anything really. So it's important to first understand what it is and how is it going to help you. Anyway, thanks guys for watching this video, and enjoy your day.